Hi, I made a Cindy Sunshine doll, and here's how I made it. I started trying to make a sewing pattern by looking at this full body shot of Cindy. However, drawing a sewing pattern freehand is hard. So instead, I bought some googly eyes that looked enough like the eyes Cindy has on TV. These eyes were used to gauge the size of the doll as a whole. For the body itself, I made the basic shape of the head, torso, and feet out of newspaper and masking tape. The feet were easy. I just neatened up the pattern I made, making sure the top of the foot was the same width as the leg. For the head and the torso, I just cross-referenced between the shapes I made with already existing sewing patterns. The individual panels for Cindy's head were averaging at 7 centimeters wide and reminded me of an egg, so I went with this egg pattern to work from to make the shape of the head. Cindy reminds me of a ragdoll, so I looked up ragdoll sewing patterns and decided to use this pattern as a starting point to make my own pattern. I made the arms and legs the same size as the torso as, to the best of my observation, those are the proportions of the doll on Power Rangers. With the basic shape of the body complete, it was time to try and resolve the problems in Cindy's neck. Even when fully stuffed, the neck just couldn't support the weight of the head. It looked like a pointing bird. So I went to the fabric store. The staff member I spoke to suggested a dowel, but I was worried that would poke through the fabric, so I bought some boning instead. And as I was making my way home, the Ghostbusters car showed up. Neat. My plan was to attach the boning to the back of the doll. I tested my idea with a basting stitch and it worked well enough, I guess. So I broke out even more scrap fabric and made a second mock-up of just the head and the torso. However, remembering the dowel the lady at the fabric store suggested and the fact I'm a cheapskate who just bought more material in the form of boning, I decided to Frankenstein her dowel suggestion with my boning idea and turned to corsetry. Taking inspiration from the boning channels found in corsets, I made a tube, being careful to make sure it was tall enough to fill the neck but not compromise the shape of the head, and it worked! With the mock-up stage complete, it was time to make my Cindy Sunshine doll proper. I chose to make the doll out of canvas, simply because, to the best of my observation, that's what the doll on TV was made out of. The ladies at the wool shop were nice. One pointed out that Cindy's hair has a pattern, and another explained that I would need this size of needle to work with the yarn. Which sadly means I had to buy more needles. The yarn was used for making Cindy's black details, but the mouth and white part of her eye were made using embroidery floss. These details were achieved using a combination of the following embroidery stitches: brick, back, and satin. I did contemplate making the arms using piecing to conserve fabric, but I didn't want to sew through the embroidery. Unfortunately, I did still have to sew through the yarn embroidery a bit anyway, but I minimized it, I suppose. I did manage to avoid sewing through Cindy's lips, however. Cindy's hair, what little there is, was achieved using French knots. The three strands of hair Cindy has were achieved by applying a French knot in reverse. I would pass the needle through the fabric, pushing it through to the right side, then start wrapping the yarn around the needle, finally pull the yarn through, and voila! Cindy had hair. Now it was time to make Cindy's shoes. As I said earlier, making the sewing pattern was easy. The hard part were making her spikes. Cindy has 10 spikes on the soles of her feet, but I was worried I wouldn't be able to find appropriate spikes that could match the show prop and be in proportion with my doll, so I compromised and used felting wool instead. The spikes were held in place with a basting stitch, and then I just attached the sole to the rest of the foot as normal with a running stitch. Additional top stitching was applied to make sure the stuffing stayed in the feet. The body was nearing completion, but the bottom was hard to sew, as there wasn't enough fabric for the feed dogs in my sewing machine to grip to, resulting in a stitch that admittedly does work, but is kind of messy. All that aside, the doll was indeed finished. Now it was time to make Cindy's outfit. The skirt is pleated. I think it's a jackknife pleat and has an outer layer of lace with a pattern of some sort. I wasn't sure. So I settled on this polyester floral lace and cotton poplin. I attached the lace to the cotton with a zigzag stitch, but there was a problem. The zigzag stitches didn't look like zigzags. Thanks to this video on a channel called ABC Sewing Machine, I was able to identify and fix the problem. The lower thread tension was too tight, and using what's known as the yo-yo trick, I was able to get the tension just right. And then the zigzag stitches actually looked like zigzags. But that's not the end of me trying to make the skirt. Oh no. To make the pleats, I doubled the waist of the skirt, but I doubled the wrong number, making the skirt impossible to pleat. And the really sad part? I did it twice! I took the two incorrect skirts, what little fabric was left over, and pieced them together. So after 2 incorrect attempts, Cindy had a pleated straight skirt. From what I can tell, the green part of Cindy's outfit is felt, but that's awkward to clean. So I substituted it with cotton poplin. Attaching the vest to the skirt was fine. The buttons, however, were too thick for my sewing machine, so I had to sew them by hand. Then there was the pink trim, which was just annoying. I didn't buy enough, so I had to replace it. I made the straps too long, so I had to shorten them. And the trim was too thick, so I had to turn the sewing machine needle by hand. Now for the final part of Cindy's outfit, her purple top. It looks like a baby grow, I think. It's sweatshirt material? I wasn't too sure. However, I couldn't find sweatshirt fabric in this color, so I went with more cotton poplin. The front of the top has a cat and 2 flowers on it. To make the cat, I appliqued the shape with a zigzag stitch, and all the other details were embroidered on by hand with a double-threaded needle. The cheeks, inside of the ears, and mouth are a brick stitch. Everything else is a back stitch with 2 French knots for the pupils. The flowers were salvaged from a hat and sewn on by hand. The back of Cindy's top confused me. I had no clue what was going on with the closure. If anyone knows, please tell me in the comments. A t-shirt of mine, which had most definitely seen better days, had a closure that was a perfect size for my doll. I copied the closure onto the top I was making, salvaging the buttons in the process. And you know what? For my first button closure, I think I did a good job. Cindy's sleeves are princess sleeves, so I found this free pattern and altered it as I saw fit to match the top I made, applied this to the actual outfit. With that, the doll was finally finished. Now, how do I feel about this Cindy Sunshine doll? Muddled. On one hand, the proportions are wrong, but on the other hand, the detail is there. For example, the head, it's all there. The eye patch, the hair, it's all there. However, the head of the doll I made is too round when compared to the doll seen on TV. Considering the accident I had when sizing up the skirt and the straps, I'd say I was a bit clumsy when making this doll, but I'm happy with my fabric choices, and I'm definitely proud of myself for learning how to make a button closure and how to work with boning. So yeah, I may not know how to feel about my attempt to recreate Cindy Sunshine, but maybe you have a positive opinion. Maybe you have a negative opinion. Either way, feel free to comment on this video. And hey, whilst you're at it, maybe like this video and share it so others can like, comment, and share as well. Also, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!